Welcome back, everyone, to This Week in WordPress and Tech. This is episode number 684. I will be your hostess with the mostest today. My name is Stephanie Hudson, and I represent Focus WP. Would you like to meet today's panel? Why don't we go around the room, but I won't require you guys to know whose turn it is, because I know you can't handle that. Let's start with John Locke.
John from Lockdown SEO.
Spencer.
Hey, it's Spence from WP-Launchify.com.
And Rob, our special guest.
Well, thank you. I'm Rob from MicroConf.
Miss Heather.
I'm Heather Wild-Renzi, CTO of The Difference Consulting.
And our fearless leader.
It's Jonathan Denwood from WP-Tonic.
Dun, 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 dun.
Maybe he has some fears. I don't know. I thought he was fearless. All right. Why don't we take just a quick minute? We're going to hear from our major sponsors. We'll be right back. And we're back, everybody. Castos and Blog Vault have some special offers. We've got some other cool things you can check out. Recommendations from the panel, recommendations from the tribe, all kind of cool things from our sponsors. WP-Tonic.com/recommendations. So let's dive in to this week's stories. We're going to visit with some of our old friends this week. We've got all kind of fun things. We're going to talk about our friend Elon. We're going to talk about our good pal Elizabeth. We've got all kind of cool things coming up. First up, let's talk about some WordPress news. There wasn't tons of WordPress news this week, but the first article is in WP Tavern, WordPress contributors host 6.0 walkthrough. Did anybody have a chance to watch the walkthrough? No, I did not. Okay, this is going to be a great discussion then, since everybody shook their head no. So, Heather, what do you think about them doing this little informal walkthrough of new features?
I actually think it's really helpful.
We can't hear you.
Oh no, you can't hear
I
me.
can.
I hear you.
Yeah, okay.
I hear.
All right.
You can. I
Yeah.
can't hear
Loud.
anybody all of a sudden. That's
I'm loud.
Now you're
All right.
loud.
Okay,
Please
cool.
continue. I'll sort my
Well,
issues out.
I think it's helpful when companies do these kinds of walkthroughs because for the people that are really interested in learning about new features, whether we watch them right away or come back to them later, which is generally what I do. Like if I'm trying to figure out something, I'll watch it later and then skip to the thing that I'm actually interested in and watch it at like 2x speed. Yeah, I mean, I think it's great that they've done this, and there are a lot of nuggets that are useful in these kinds of walkthroughs. And I mean, also in WordPress 6, there are a lot of things coming up. So yeah, I mean, it's I mean, and 120 people actually showed up for a live Q&A, which I mean, I think that's kind of amazing right now in like Zoom fatigue land. So yeah, I mean, I think it's great.
Well, Stephanie doesn't have some audio right now, so should we pass it to the next?
I think I need to.
Jonathan.
Shall I
Take the
jump?
controls of the airplane, John.
Shall I jump in, Stephanie, until you sort out your problems? Well, I kind of listened to Rob's last podcast, Rob, and you were talking about how you deal with legacy software and new features, and I think it's kind of relevant. I'm supposed going to be a downer again. That's my purpose, isn't it? Maybe I got a suggestion for Automatic in the Gutenberg team. Maybe they should sort out the existing problems before they go on to a new set of features. I think they need to listen to your podcast, Rob. They need words of advice and support, Rob.
I mean, geez, I don't know. I don't know. When I think of like having is it a 20-year-old code base now? 18-year-old?
Yeah,
it
must be a nightmare.
How many pieces of web software these days are that old? It's like Salesforce. There aren't that many. Even Basecamp is only 17 years old. So it's like, it has to be, the fact that they can ship anything is kind of miraculous. I'm going to be honest. I mean, I know I kind of give them credit for getting, it says 400 updates and 500 bug fixes in a single release. When I think of that as a SaaS founder, we would never do that because we can deploy every day, right? We would deploy like one bug fix and one feature because we have the luxury of it runs on our servers. And so when I think about this having to manage such a large code base, an old code base, and to not break anything, and to only be able to do a release, what do they do it every 6 months or a year? Like there's a lot of challenges there. A lot of challenges with that.
I was thinking about that the other day, and like I come from an aerospace background. Like I'm a mechanical engineer, so I think of everything in terms of like a hardware release. And so this doesn't seem that weird for me that WordPress does this, like because they're honestly, they have to think about the hardware that they're installing on. And they have to support so many different types of systems. So if you think about it from like a mechanical engineering perspective rather than a SaaS platform perspective, then it totally makes sense, their release cycle.
Exactly. It's like desktop software. All right,
You guys, I'm back, and I can hear. Can you guys say what everything you just said again, really quick? What did I miss?
You don't need. You don't need. You don't need to hear what I said. It was nothing.
All right, where are we? Are we still talking about WordPress?
Yeah.
Okay,
Spencer, ask Spencer what he thinks.
Spence.
Well, I will add in the politics of the fork in the road. So I would agree with like both what Heather and Rob said. It's interesting. I've been in WordPress since it started, literally, and I remember you could literally look at the PHP on one of those like cPanels and go like, oh, this little B2 thing is kind of clever. But here's the thing. We're at another juncture right now where 6.0 is really relevant. And that has to do with how the metaphor of building stuff on WordPress is going to go. And I'm in, by hook or by crook, at the heart of this battle and constantly having these public conversations arguing that we need this framework to move all of the stuff away and say, how are we going to do this going forward? So the code base of WordPress 6.0 is fundamentally about Gutenberg. And it's about whether we're going to do full site editing or whether we're going to do a canvas theme where people make components that are blocks into patterns. And I think that's the real issue of how amazing this is, because we as a community can actually affect the change that happens with the core. When you look at the actual, nobody would do this, but like if you write code and you look at the repository and all the bug fixes and how they handle it, it's an incredible, it's like an anthill, right? With like 1,000 ants going in and out of every day. You're like, oh my God. And everybody just grabs a piece of food and goes in and out of the hill. And somehow it keeps working. But none of those people are managing from the top down. What is this thing going to be next? And right now we're in that space where I would argue that's the most critical part about the future direction, because a SaaS company, a for-profit SaaS company, would never do the lack of direction that's happening now. And the fact that like Matt kind of goes, hey, and somebody goes, hey, but you see all the independent financial interests pulling things in their direction is causing a lot of stress, because those who build on this realized I will wake up one day and version 6.0 will come out. It will break all of the stuff that I built for my clients. Or Elementor will do that independently because they have like their little finger into the pie. And so I think getting clarity on that would be one of the most important benefits of a 6.0 release of like, what's the game, guys? What are we going to do here? That's it. I mean, there's no easy answer because there's no top-down hierarchy. We have to all argue with the megaphone for my idea makes more sense. Come join me in this idea.
Yeah, the only person that hasn't commented, Stephanie, is John. So, John, have you got?
Yeah, I think it's some of the things that are being added in this one that are kind of useful, like templates for categories, tags, taxonomies, web fonts API. Those things look to be pretty useful. Block locking is another thing that Eric Karkovac said too. So I think that this release will be a really big release, and I think this is an important release. Some of the features are coming in. We'll be able to replicate some of the features that we can already do with code. So I think it'll be good in pushing it forward.
Block locking. Wasn't that like a hip hop dance move in the 90s? I'm pretty sure.
Blocks to Men, I think, was the name of the band.
That's good.
All right, guys, why don't we move on to our next story since I missed almost all of that and I have no idea how to even follow up because I didn't hear half of it. So let's move on to our next article in Yahoo Finance. Shopify announces a 10-for-1 stock split, proposes founder share for the CEO. What do we think of this? Rob Walling, what do you think about that founder share situation?
I feel like if you don't want to be a public company, don't go public. I mean, this is essentially someone having a public company but wanting to retain private rights. They want to give him 40% voting. And it's just not how the public markets, I think, are designed for. That's not what they're designed for. They're designed to have a lot of folks with ownership, and you have to essentially get them on board. I don't know. Maybe I'm
but
just
they
old-fashioned.
said he's got a great track record. I'm sure he'll use it very responsibly.
Right, because CEO power has never. We all look at Facebook, and Mark Zuckerberg has never been a problem.
Use that power?
No, not once.
Go on.
What could go wrong there? Heather, what do you think about this situation?
So yeah, I mean the stock split is interesting. This tells me that they are they're trying to protect themselves from they're trying to protect themselves as they get bigger. And even with the founder shares, they're basically protecting themselves as well from their CEO going crazy. Basically, he only gets the founder shares until he would get an executive position or a board position. So if they decide someday that they want to oust him, then his founder shares go away. If they decide that if they decide to move him from the position that he's in, his founder shares go away. So he has to keep the company on a good track. So I think it's very smart of them to do this, but it's also suspect.
Smart and suspect. Spence, what do you think?
This is I was reading about a comparable article that I think Rob just mentioned too, with Mark Zuckerberg's unique class share. But this reminds me of the movie Wall Street, with the Blue Star Airlines. It's greed, for the lack of better word, is good. And so basically, public company, we're going to do it exactly as we want because we're the ones shuffling all the cards on the table. And I think this is just exemplary of the kind of shenanigans that go on, because the whole thing going on in this last week with Twitter being allegedly bought, not being bought by Elon Musk. And then Mark Cuban.
Don't jump our stories. Don't jump.
I know, but I'm saying Mark Cuban pitching in, he's playing all you guys because he can say this, move all the stock. Normal people get to witness how the real world of finance works, the real world of capital works. This is what goes on. And we just delude ourselves sometimes into thinking that, it's a fair playing field. You can certainly make money, but you never really are in control of what happens. So surprises can happen overnight. So who knows? I mean, it's an interesting conversation. For the majority of people, makes no difference, but it's indicative of the fact, Toby Lutke is an amazing force to be reckoned with this company and what he's done. So he deserves everything he's entitled to. But the way they structure public shares is just, this is kind of silly. I mean, insulting.
Jonathan, do you have some feelings on this?
Yeah, well, it's talk about have your cake and eat it, like what Rob said, there's no shortage of liquidity in the private market now. It's just disgraceful, really, the whole idea. And, founders, no, they're super shares. The reason why they're calling it founder is the PR department got hold of it, and they know that if you call it super shares, it's got all the connotations with Facebook, and they don't want that. But the whole thing is intellectually suspect at its core. If you want control, do what Dell did and Michael Dell, go private, go private again if you feel like they want it both ways, basically, Stephanie.
It sounds like
I'd be curious to know who will.
By the way, I don't interrupt John, but the thing that's different about this and the next story is that Twitter may not have executed on what everybody would believe is a good monetization strategy, i.e. charging big name people like Mr. T and all the rest for being on there. But Shopify clearly makes money. I mean, it's clearly a profitable company. So I find that an interesting difference when you've got a profitable company, the behavior of their shareholders and their board versus like a company that's not executing on what they could be doing.
It's kind of linked. I was discussing it with John with our previous show last week about Automatic, and I looked up how much Automatic has taken in its rounds from the VC community. It's $900 and almost $1 billion. If you add up all the rounds of investment that Automatic have taken, it's mind-boggling that the founder of Automatic has, out of the professional VC community, got almost $1 billion out of them. It's just mind-numbing when you look at Shopify and the kind of returns they've managed, and you look at the $1 billion out the founder of Automatic has managed to get out of these people. It's
the transactional company Fast that was making a play for one-click checkout flushed $500 million down the toilet, and their monthly run rate was only $50,000. Somehow that guy got away with hiring 500 employees, flushing $500 million down the toilet in a short order, and they just like, okay, sorry, shut the doors, all over. The last time I saw that happen was with that company Color years ago, that app. And that's the kind of bullshit. We were still got the Office Space guy and his wife doing yoga on their $1 billion of free money. Like, that shit happens all the time. That shows how Wild West this is. It is like Wall Street. Like, oh, we lost $1 billion. I'll make it up tomorrow, Larry. You know.
Fun fact is that Fast raised more money than Shopify did.
Yeah.
Now, Shopify, when they went public, they raised more, but from private VCs. It's incredible.
There's no correlation between profitability, good business, or common sense. It's just who knows the right people. And Fast's founder was amazing at raising money and spending it on things like hiring rock bands and, you know.
Well, obviously I've got to be a little bit careful. That's me saying it. Obviously, that particular company, how it was, you know, obviously I think the authorities are I would have thought, are going to be looking at that particular company with interest. I think that's as far as I would want to put it. But there we go.
Now,
Who's ready to move on to the next one?
When is WP-Tonic raising around so
Yeah.
we can have more entertainment on these shows?
Yeah, let's jump to the next one. But like, if I would suspect that if
We'll hire some pop blockers. Some block blockers.
if WordPress.com was its own separate company or Automatic, and it was going against Shopify would blow it out of the water. I see that as being not Wix or Squarespace, also them, but I see that one as being one of their biggest competitors because, you know, WooCommerce is a direct competitor, and Shopify is doing a lot of gain in the CMS market. Anyway.
Just to, from a VC's perspective, like if they've taken $1 billion in capital, then that means the VCs are expecting to make over the lifetime of their investment, they're expecting to make $100 billion out of that investment, at least. So that shows you how much money they think is in this ecosystem.
Yeah,
You agree?
it does. Yeah. I tell you, that is what they're looking. How it's going to be achieved is going to be interesting, isn't it, Ever? But that's what they're expecting. I just didn't realize it's all on Wikipedia. It's all out. I just got it from Wikipedia. But when you add up all the funding events that Automatic have gone through, it's not quite, but it's almost to $1 billion. It's just really quite, and I don't think they've got any. I don't see any clear plan of how you really monetize it. I'm sorry, I just don't. And I think it was linked to our last week's story about WordPress.com, because I think there's some voices that saying, how are we going to monetize it? How are we going to get a return for the investment that's been poured into this thing. And I just don't see any clear roadmap. I just don't see it.
Going public, right? That would be a liquidity event. I mean, at this point, they're big. Who's going to acquire them, right? Someone would have to buy them for a lot of money. I don't see Matt selling. So, is WordPress or Automatic? Are they public with their revenue top line? Anyone know?
No, I don't think they are.
Because valuations have calmed down a little bit in venture right now due to recession fears or whatever and inflation. But 12 months ago, people were raising it 100 times ARR. It was crazy. Normally it's like 10 to 20 is a decent range. But I mean, there were some raises. I think Fast was like this. Well, I guess Fast had no ARR, right? And raised 100-something million. So, but there were it was not uncommon to be in that 50 to 100 times your annual revenue. So that's, I know we need to move on to the next story, but that just gives you an idea of how crazy.
That's the nature of the problem is this. I spent a long time in the real estate investment world, right? As a developer, 25 some years. When I started, interest rates were 14% and market cap rates were 10. You get a 10 cap and you had to work for it. When interest rates go down to below 3% and everybody has cash because there's nowhere to even buy a bond or get a return on a normal investment other than the stock market, now it puts this on extraordinary casino pressure on the market. And that's what we're seeing with things like this, because there's no real big fish to swallow WordPress, is there? There's no, I have $100 billion laying around, chomp, chomp, I'm going to buy up what they bought. So instead, you're going to have this freemium model circa 2005 that we just own all of the eyeballs. Eventually, we'll figure it out. And what's happening is these little experiments like WordPress.com a week ago where let's get rid of all the freeloaders because it's getting really expensive times 100,000 people to keep them around. And those things go up and down with the market forces. But I think that WordPress is interesting only insofar as that it's very sticky when people have their code in there, but it's not sticky because of a monetization reason, right? It's not like when you have a Stripe account, they're going to have a piece of you forever. But WordPress, you can always migrate off. And so it'll be an interesting ride for sure.
Guys, let's move on to our next story. If you are listening to this out there, tribe, by the way, feel free to put your thoughts. What do you think about this article? This seems to be a hotly disputed one today. Pop your comments into the chat wherever you're watching or listening. And Jonathan will be monitoring all of this.
That woke me up.
All right, next up, we're going to go over to TheVerge.com and talk about this article. Elon Musk offers to buy Twitter in takeover attempts. Oh, Elon. You guys probably, I don't know how you guys feel about him. I can't ever remember. You guys hate everybody, so you probably do. But I love watching Elon Musk. I think he's so fun.
No. Well,
John is like,
no. Well, look.
Do you need to take a minute, John? Do you need to calm down? You got it?
The Twitter thing is the pump and dump, because he bought 9% and then floated the idea that he was going to buy the rest of the company at a higher price than it's valuated. Then he dumped billions of shares for a profit. So it's a pump and dump. But one of the reasons why the Twitter board didn't want him on is because he's under investigation by the SEC. He's already broken some rules about buying more than 5% of a company without disclosing it. But the bigger thing is, if you look at things that he's in trouble for at Tesla with fostering a culture of segregation and racism. He's actually being sued by the state of California for this. Black employees being called all kinds of vile things, being segregated, and things that he posts himself on his own Twitter account, which are vile and kind of just kind of disgusting. So, I don't really have any respect for him, but I know that other people might see him differently. But
yeah, can I say something, Stephanie?
Yep.
I'll allow it. Yes.
Yeah,
go ahead, Jonathan. Yeah.
Well, I'm not. I agree with most of what John said, but they say history doesn't repeat itself, but there's definitely echoes, because I see Elon as very similar to Henry Ford. Very similar kind of, there's a good part of Elon and there's the bad side. And I think that's like us all. There's always a good side and a bad side of us all. It's just when you get that kind of money and public persona, it just gets amplified. But like Henry Ford was seen as the classic entrepreneur, inventor, industrialist that started the modern age, the modern American age, right? But there was a real bad side to Henry. There was the side, he was a totally vermin, anti-Jewish individual that financed a whole magazine. He financed the whole thing. Every episode, every monthly was filled with the most vile anti-Jewish propaganda possible. And he was a supporter of Nazi Germany, of Hitler. There was a real dark side to Henry. And I'm not saying that Elon is anything like Henry, but there definitely are echoes. There's the good side of Elon, the developer of Tesla, the SpaceX, the entrepreneur, but there's a real dark side to Elon as well, and we're seeing it.
Isn't there a dark side to everyone who is in that position, though? It's nuts. Like, you see, it's almost like in order to achieve the level of success that they do, you look at, sure, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison.
Okay.
Any of these. What?
He posted a meme with the NPC character. I don't know if you know memes, but it's like an NPC character with Ukraine flag and then all kinds of pride flags behind it, saying "I support the current thing," but he specifically picked out pride flags. Then he posted this other meme. I don't know if you know the meme where the guy is like he's standing in or sitting in different like locations by himself. But it's Netflix waiting for the Ukraine war to end so it can post a movie about a Ukrainian black soldier that falls in love with a transgender Russian person. I mean, what kind of why? I mean, I know that a lot of people give him a pass because he has a lot of money, so we perceive him as being successful, so he must be righteous. But this is who he is.
I don't think anybody says that, for starters. Yeah, like nobody thinks having a lot of money makes you righteous.
Yeah, it's just things that I think that a lot of people don't see.
I mean, okay, so if you take it face value, if you actually, forget like all of the nefarious things about this whole Twitter deal and the pump and dump potential and all of that, and pretend for a second that he actually is honest and genuine about wanting to take over Twitter. Think about the man's a libertarian, and the idea that he wants, that he would actually want to buy a company that would give him basically today's newspaper and take it private so that he wouldn't have to answer to any board, like any fiduciary responsibility, any of that. So he would now be able to have his own, he would be the new
Hearst.
Yeah, Hearst. If he really is genuine about wanting Twitter, he would have his own, he could be Rupert Murdoch in a month.
Also, what is this weird thing about the 420 stuff that he does? That's such a tiny little element of this story, but it's such a weird. Also, that's so weird that he has to include.
No, he's just a juvenile frat boy, and
yeah, exactly.
That's just. He's just showing everybody. The same reason that he has Kotaku memes as his Twitter avatar every now and then. He's showing you that he's actually still a nerd.
For sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, juvenile is the right word for the he's making jokes about buying, spending billions of dollars and throwing in a little.
And you can't forget that he is severely autistic. like, I mean, like, no matter what, he's severely autistic, and he does not know how to actually communicate with real people on
Read
a
the room, Elon.
like, so this is him trying to communicate, he probably did a 420 joke once, like 30 years ago. People laughed,
And somebody laughed at it. Yeah.
and now like he does it all the time because that's like what autistic people do.
So what does Rob think?
So I was going to chime in with that. He's on the autism spectrum, which is why whenever I've seen his tweets, and I haven't seen any of the stuff that John Locke was talking about. So I just have always marveled at him as like a modern day Tony Stark, right? He's Stark Industries, and I'm not the first to make that analogy, right? But so I've admired what he's built from a distance, haven't really given him a ton of thought. I don't follow him on Twitter. I don't super pay attention to what he does. But when he comes up with an idea of we're going to have a boring company, or I have an idea of building a super high speed train, or we can just bore underneath LA and put in subway and then people go do it. It's just incredible. Like, I don't know many minds that are thinking that far outside the box.
But Rob, what about this pump and dump? He's already been in hot water once for a pump and dump.
Well, that's the thing, is why would he doesn't need the money. Let's say he pumps and dumps and makes $1 billion, $2 billion. He's already worth 150. Why would he do that? And that's what I don't understand. Is he doing it for the lulz, or is he doing it, for, again, like being on the spectrum, back to Heather's point, it can shift the way you interact with people, right? It can shift. Your thinking is so different than it's there's neurotypical and there's neurodiversity. And the further you get in, my eldest son has autism, and the further you get into neurodiversity, people sometimes do weird things that normies don't understand. I don't understand why my son, so I'm not excusing Elon's behavior, and I'm not an Elon advocate, nor have I been an Elon detractor to date. I just kind of watch what he does and say, what's going to happen next? And if the SEC, if he runs into problems with the SEC again, that's going to be a real problem for him.
Yeah. One of my favorite bonkers Elon things was when those miners, not miners, but they were stuck, those kids were stuck in the mine, and he was like, I'll mail you a submarine. And he just like sent a little tiny submarine to like try and get him. Like what you're saying, it's like watching a movie or a cartoon or something. It's just so insane. I agree with you. Like I'm the same. Like I'm not for or against him. It's like entertainment to watch the things that he does. And
then the guy who actually rescued him, what happened to the guy that actually rescued him? He said that guy's a pedo. And then he tried to get a journalist to write up that he was a child rapist. Yes, this happened. Go look it up.
John.
No, I know.
It's true. It's true. What does Spencer think?
I think what happens, I mean, despite his personal quirks, you can look at lots of the billionaires, the Jack Dorseys and all the rest of them. They all have odd behaviors. And there's lots of stories how, first of all, money magnifies your existing problems or benefits, whatever you want to call it. And we've seen that in some cases, like Tony Hsieh, that like unfortunately amplifies it in the wrong direction. But with Elon, he clearly always had the capability to dream outside the scope of what normal people think about, which may be, again, his unique gift. And he's brought us lots of amazing things that aren't necessarily financial. Like Jeff Bezos may be, marketplace stuff, but Elon's literally changing how we might go to other planets or how we might have vehicles and get rid of the carbon economy. So I give him credit for that. But when you take somebody who's succeeded and then they have all that money and then they magnify those tendencies they have, you get really, Hollywood style behavior out of them. And that's what's going on now. I mean, he can throw around $100 million like you and I lay a 20 on the table at a coffee shop. So it's not surprising to me that he's playing these fun games like, hey, SEC, and these memes, while sort of unfortunate and disgusting, are also the behavior of somebody who's like in the Henry Ford category, Carnegie, the rest of them. They all had the tendencies to view people as compartmentalized, like you're smarter, you're not smart because of this, that, and the other reason. And like there's no conclusion to any of this because we're not going to change it. And when you're the number one or number two or number three most wealthy person in the world, you're pretty well untouchable. I mean, there's virtually nothing that can take him down other than
Well,
his.
that's the problem. I don't think anybody should be untouchable, and that's the whole point.
But we've built a society, a capitalist society around that, and the alternative is what's happening with Putin. Like, he's untouchable, but only because he's like a gangster. So we either have capitalism and you're untouchable because you play by the rules as they're written and torque people, or you're untouchable because you build up a mafioso style government. And I don't think the alternative to capitalism is very attractive.
Well, I think there's a third way, but there we go.
Yeah, but that's like you and I in a dream world. I mean, yeah, maybe we'll all advance as human beings to that point because we need help, but it would be great to get there. But capitalism and communism don't exist in the spiritualism world, unfortunately. They're opposing forces to a certain degree.
Rob, do you have any final thoughts on this before we go on to our break?
Oh, I was going to dive into the Theranos story. No, I think that
Just
that
one
sums
second.
it up. And
Just hold
hold
on, we'll get there.
I appreciate John for sharing Elon's tweets that he mentioned in the chat, so we can check them out.
That's in our private chat, so maybe we'll share some of those in the comments on the video, if you want to, John. All right, guys, we are going to take a quick break. We're going to let everybody cool down for a second after this heated discussion about our pal Elon, and we are going to just take a quick break to hear from our sponsors again. And we're back. Now, there's a little something else I wanted to tell you guys about. 10 a.m. Pacific on Fridays coming up. You are going to get to hear two of your pals here, Jonathan Denwood and Spencer Foreman, are going to be doing a live YouTube show called The Funnel Machine. And they are going to be reviewing and going through funnels. And if you would like to have your funnel reviewed live on air, you can submit it to them and they will tell you what you're doing right and wrong. Go to the WP-Tonic YouTube page to check it out, 10 a.m. Pacific on Fridays. And now, Jonathan, we're going to move on to one of our favorite stories.
I'll do the voice, Stephanie.
I'm not doing it today.
Oh, please do the voice.
This is about Sunny.
Please,
Listen,
please.
this one's about Sunny.
Please do the voice,
disrespect him.
Stephanie. Please do the voice.
Listen, Jonathan, we don't need to talk about the voice.
You need the blonde wig, though.
I do. So this article is in the New York Times. It apparently got so much traffic that they put it behind the paywall. So if you didn't read it early, you can't see it now. But basically, it's Sunny's day in court. So
Tip for the users: New York Times firewall. Hit reload. Hit the stop button real quick. You can read everything.
Oh, that's such a cheaty thing to do, but okay.
I'm not saying you can't pay them. You could pay them if you want. I'm simply saying if you want to see what the story is,
If you want to steal it, just do it.
you can do that or the reader.
Gotcha.
Please,
Gotcha.
stealing. Give me a fucking break. I mean, seriously.
Get out the bleep button. Jeez.
Man!
You managed to get that. I normally get that really out of him.
Stephanie, you just broke my 12-show streak of not swearing.
I broke it. It's my fault. Okay, I'm sorry, Spencer, that I made
Stealing the digital content that is like literally there for anybody to look at. Give me a break.
All right, fine.
I didn't break into their house.
Calm down, Spencer.
Man, all right. I've had two people explode on me today. Let's see if I can make everybody mad. Let's go around the room. Who's feeling hot and feisty now? Let's talk about Sunny Balwani for a minute. He's going to go to court. Is it humanly possible for him to have a fair trial after everything that has been in the news? And there has been an entire miniseries made about this whole situation. Jonathan, come on, tell us what you think. You know,
Yes,
you've got some
it's
strong
obviously
feelings.
I'm dual citizen. I'm British and American, but I grew up in Britain. And there's good points and bad points about both legal systems, but I find this really bizarre.
Mostly the wigs in Britain, though.
Yeah, the wigs, all the old tossers. But I find this bit about the American legal system really odd, because in Britain, if you're accused of a criminal charge, there's a total media blackout until the trial, and the result. No media outlet in the UK, apart from the basic facts, Mr. Denwood has been arrested and will be trialled at this date. There's no comment until the trial. The idea, that this individual can get a fair trial after a mini series of 8 episodes that's been watched by 6 million people about his shenanigans and what he got on with Elizabeth, that somehow he can get a fair trial now, I think it's bizarre. I find the whole thing, I found the story of the technology story of Elizabeth and him and the whole thing fascinating.
Well, amazingly, not everybody has Hulu. And they are going to be able to find
somebody.
They are going to be able to find a jury for this.
When they do the voir dire, that's going to be the questions. They interview people. That's the voir dire, and they say, "Well, what do you do this? What do you do that?" And that'll be like question number 1. Will be,
do you have Hulu?
Netflix? Or whatever. Was it on Netflix or Hulu? I watched it. I can't remember. But
Hulu.
Yeah, but I just find it bizarre that you can have a team that's watched by millions of people and think this individual's going to get somehow some fair trial. It's just, it's mind-numbing for me, but I come from Britain. It just wouldn't be allowed. It just, to me, I want to make it totally clear that I think he's guilty as hell. But
because you watched the miniseries, obviously. You've done your research.
I've been following it well before that. But there we go.
Rob, how do you feel about Elizabeth and Sunny?
So I think I agree with Heather that I think there are going to be plenty of people who have, like my dad and mom. I bet my mom hasn't even heard of Theranos. She doesn't pay. She's a smart person, but she just doesn't pay attention to the tech press. She pays attention to a completely different world than the 6 of us on this show. And if I said the word Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, she would have no idea who I was talking about. My dad has probably heard of Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes, but then would be like, wasn't there some fraud or something? Right? It's like, so I do think that they can find a jury. You think about, O.J. Simpson had a jury trial. Like there are much more, I'll say popular, infamous, like cases where they find people who, hopefully, knock on wood, are unbiased. I really enjoyed The Dropout. I think if folks haven't watched it, they really should. Sunny Balwani, it's just crazy to me to see how when shit starts going bad, people, the finger pointing of these, I'm just going to say alleged criminals. They just, sure. It's instantly just like if they're willing to screw their potential customers, their people in healthcare, if they're willing to screw their own employees and threaten, the moment that it goes bad, the executives are just turning on each other. Boom, boom. We co-founded this company, but suddenly it's like, no, you did it. No, you did it. No, he coerced me. No, she coerced me. I wasn't even the CEO. But he forced it. And it's just this he said, she said.
And it's healthcare. It's their bloody results. Cancer patients.
It is crazy.
They just didn't care a damn, did they? They just. Yeah. Really,
and that's the irony isn't lost that her father was working for Enron either, because I remember, I was an adult living through I was in law school at the time. Like the Enron thing was like Skilling and Lay and the other guy, they were all just like, you couldn't believe the stuff that was going down. So Rob's got a good point. It's like rats on a ship, Well, the saying is like they all come out and it's like you see where they're all hiding because like the ship's going down and then everything's like last rat for itself. So he's by the way, he in real life is not exactly Brad Pitt, but like he was played by a character who was far less attractive in the movie, which in some sense made him more of a villainous character. I'm not like trying to pick on the actor, but like they didn't like Elizabeth Holmes, the actress was very close in looks and feel. This guy doesn't look like his character, so I wonder if that was intentional.
No, so Naveen Andrews is super hot when he was young. He was on Lost. He's now
that's where I knew him from.
Yeah. So gosh. He's younger Naveen Andrews, if she'd met him when she was 18, they
don't you agree then, like in the actual movie it was sort of like they juxtaposed the attractiveness and the things of his look and her look to make it like
any woman that would know. And so yes, Naveen Andrews is older now, but it's just an unfortunate thing that he's in his 50s and whatever, but they can't de-age him. But if you know what he looked like then, then she would have totally been all in.
I mean, they had a 19-year or something age gap too, right? Like they're in real life, they're not matched up.
That's right. Yeah, there's a big
So-
it's 20-something years, I believe.
This would have been a good role for Kevin Spacey to play.
What?
I have no idea what you mean by that.
Because Kevin
Absolutely.
Spacey is already
Most of the guest
villainized-
panel have no idea
already
what this is
villainized
about.
in Hollywood. And I'm saying, like, they
have you
really,
seen Sonny Balwani? Like,
when I watched the show, I couldn't help but thinking he was a sympathetic guy and like the way they portrayed him, but the way that they set them apart, I kept thinking like they were really emphasizing like there's, you know, like he's fallen under her spell or whatever, and you know, obviously dramatized for the movie. But this guy in real life, you know, he's not unreasonable, you know.
I think, I mean, higher level, like what a catastrophic fraud, because it's not like, you know, we could say fast. Someone might, I don't believe fast is fraud, by the way. I think fast is just irresponsibility, but some could argue, oh, fast is fraud. But it's a SaaS company they raised from venture capitalists. Yes, I'm sure some employees are out of jobs. I'm sure some damage was done. But to talk about Enron, I almost said, to talk about Theranos, to put people's health in danger, to just lie, you know, and to lie bald-faced to so many people. And before the dropout, there was the incredible John Carreyrou book called Bad Blood. And if you like the dropout or you want to follow the story, like that book, I listened to it on audio. I had driveway moments where I'd pull into my driveway and I'm like, nope, I'm going to sit here and listen because I don't want to go in because I'm so right. It's such the style, and it's incredibly deeply triple fact checked, right? Because he's a New York Times reporter and they didn't want to get sued. So everything is, you know, I'll say as factual as can be, or to be verified. And yet still the story is like, oh my God, these people truly, like, the definition of the word sociopath is someone who gives no shits about anyone but themselves or their means. And it's like, I don't want to throw terms around, but it's like, that's what it feels like when you listen to this. Like, who does this? Who does not? Who has so little conscience that this is what you're willing to sacrifice people's health for your power or gain or finance? I don't know.
I mean, the health part makes it particularly egregious. I can think of like the Fire Festival and Enron in the same category of like you're screwing people clearly for money and maybe polluting and stuff. But like, yeah, like this would be like 23andMe making up results of your DNA test. Like just like throwing it down the stairs.
No, it's worse than that. It's worse than that because it was giving diagnoses that were either telling people they had something or not identifying things, and you know, so that is even worse. But at what point, though? I mean, I've said this before when we've talked about this article. When you've got something that you believe in, but you need all the funding in order for it to come to fruition, where's the line where you are innovating and then you're committing fraud? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's that line, and it's somewhere, and it's blurry. And when you are so dedicated, and if you, like, let's say, again, like we're doing with these other ones, let's say she really believed that was a thing that could happen and that could help people.
Yeah,
if you
but the
really
thing
believe
was-
that, where do you stop? And like, at what point do you say, like, okay, we're going to hurt people now. We have to stop, and I have to face the facts that I'm billions in the hole, you know, like that would, I don't think she's right. I'm just saying, like, that's such a blurry area to me.
Well, the fact was that she tried to compare herself to Steve Jobs, but Steve had a brilliant technical founder, one of the most, at the time, a genius as his joint technical partner. She had nobody. She had no ability, no. The whole thing was just pie in sky from the beginning. She didn't even have the sense to find a technical partner that stood some chance of doing the job.
That's not true. She found people in the beginning that did, but then the more they told her that it couldn't be done, that's when she fired everybody, and she found somebody that was like, I will tell you that this can be done, and I'll figure out a way at least to do it. So like, what she didn't like was people telling her this is 5 years away, this is 10 years away.
The Roseanne's sister told her that at the beginning, and the lady who played the VC or whatever, who's the professor. I can't remember the actress's name, but when she has a conversation, you know, from the show Roseanne, that
I
actress,
know exactly who you mean.
it's Sheldon's
That's why I'm
mom.
dying.
The lady who plays Sheldon's mom. She said, like, this ain't gonna work. It's 5 years away. She gave her all the things up front, and she just didn't want to take no for an answer on that. So.
Guys, we got to move on. We have talked this story to death over the past couple months anyway. The next story we're going to go to is in theatlantic.com, and the title is Why American Teens Are So Sad, which is doesn't sound very techy, but as we get into this, it's talking about technology and social media being a contributing factor. What did you think about this article, John?
Yeah. So. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant the other John that went away.
Oh, that he walked away?
Nope. Yeah. I mean, they're facing down a world where the adults don't care about climate change. The cost of the dream of owning a home for millennials or Gen Z or Gen Alpha. I mean, they'd have to be millionaires just to own a home. I will say that this article says that LGBT shows like the hopelessness going up, and it says, well, I don't understand why this is because it's generally more accepted. Yes and no, because you see current day all these states trying to pass laws like Florida and Tennessee and all these different places that are like, don't say gay, all these places trying to basically roll back the clock on transgender, on gay and lesbian, on bisexual people, and basically force them back into the closet. You see politicians trying to repeal civil rights that have been won. Social media, all these things have been happening for decades and decades. The only thing that's changed is the teenagers are more aware of the things that are happening, and we all are if we choose to be. That's the only thing that's different.
So, John, I think in the article, though, it talks about specifically those sort of LGBT and all those kind of issues that teens are facing. But in the chart that they have pictured there, it shows that those rates of they're using the term sadness, depression, sort of as like a depression synonym, I think. But it's going up for everybody. It's not just those kids that are dealing with this. It's also multiple different races, male, female, etc. There's an overall increase.
Well, again, you see, if you're a kid in high school and you see how the adults are running things, and again, this has always been happening, but all these advances that have been made, like there's people like trying to roll them back actively. You see things like all these politicians trying to roll back laws. You see, if you're a person of color, you see black people being shot by cops. If you're a white person, maybe you feel like the country is changing. Maybe you're listening to somebody like Ben Shapiro or something, and you're up in arms about that. It could be different things for different people. If you're a woman, I mean, definitely you see what's happening in Texas, in Tennessee, and all these places that are passing laws that basically are rolling back Roe versus Wade as much as they can. So there's many things that would depress or anger teens as well as adults.
Yeah, but John, I think everything that you said is element of truth to it, but I think on the technology side, I think social media, YouTube, TikTok, it's not to be blamed, but it has put the truth more out there. It's a bit like when the Gutenberg press technology, you could print the Bible. Everybody thought it would enhance, but it actually it's not the fundamental reason, but it just puts everything on steroids. And also, I also think the baby, but I'm just on the crest of Generation X. I think the baby boomer and the Generation X, we really need to look in the mirror. I think we got some responsibility from the depressive mess that the next generation, when they look, the millennials and the other generation, what do they see? It's not the most prettiest picture, is it? I think I would get a bit depressed if I was studying, in all truth, Stephanie. But maybe that I'm English, I'm dour anyway. So
I've noticed, even before the pandemic, I was commenting I'm a Gen Xer as well, right? So I don't have kids, but a lot of my friends, my peers, their kids are teenagers, and I would see their kids, and I would think, like, they don't behave like teenagers I've known in any other generation. They don't run in packs like teenagers used to do. They have one or two friends. They don't go out. They want to stay home and FaceTime or play video games, or like that sounds stereotypical, but it's not. It's actually like what they're doing. Their social skills are so completely and totally different. They don't communicate the same way. They can't talk to people. They don't look people in the eye. And I've even made the comment. I said, like, in the next decade, when these kids start being the ones that are taking over in business, it's going to be fascinating to see what this change in like personalities as like culturally, kind of what that does to the business world or to other, large entities, politics, things like that, because it's so fundamentally different than any other group of teenagers you read about, hear about, even like way back when. And then you stack on top of that the pandemic. I mean, I'm more anxious and depressed after the past 2 years, aren't you? Like, and if you're a moody teenager with your hormones going crazy, like, that's a big pot of drama stirred up there that's going to be difficult. Heather, what do you think? You're nodding along.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a controversial thing too, but all of these high school students and like teenagers and even tweens, like, one of the things that some studies have shown that they've done, like when they would normally be like socializing and having their first date and first kiss and all that, they were stuck inside during the pandemic. So they all turned to porn. And like they've been watching, like, I mean, like really hardcore porn too. So like all of that like socialization that they would have had, now that they're starting to come back together, like they have really screwed up ideas of what relationships should be. So, and what consent is. So, like they think that it should, like, I mean, they're all just having really terrible ideas of sexual relationships now at really early ages. So, I mean, it's going to be a really screwed up generation from a socialization standpoint, from a relationship standpoint, from a connection standpoint. Yeah, I mean, there's so many issues that this generation is going to have.
Right. And the impact that that's going to have down the line even is because, you could talk about what happened to baby boomers and then what happened to the next generation and like how that trickles down. So then what comes even after this, like.
I think we need to get on to the recommendations.
Well, I just think it's going to be like, we're going to usher in Logan's Run. That's what we're going to happen.
Oh, they're delightful.
Right,
I bet you need to go to the recommendations, Stephanie.
I know. I'm going to go to the recommendations, Jonathan.
Sorry.
All right. No, I know. It's okay.
I'm just trying to be helpful.
All right, Jonathan Denwood, what's your recommendation for the week?
It's a YouTube channel. Hopefully she's going to be coming on the show sometime. I'm having a discussion with her. And she runs a channel. It's a channel called Live Streaming Pro. If you're into live streaming, as we are doing now, it gives you loads of tips and insights. I bought a little device so I can do the flames panel. I'm going to have flames and sound effects probably next week.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I can't wait. Can I have the buttons? Can I do?
Well, you have to buy your own stream deck. You have
all
to
right.
buy your own stream deck, but I've got some just for Spencer to put him in his place.
Nice. John Locke, what's your recommendation
All
for
right.
the week, my friend?
My recommendation is for this podcast called Work in SEO. It's at workatseo.com. Also want to give a big shout out to all the Starbucks that have unionized. Keep going.
Spencer.
I posted two things in there. One was a story about a lady who's older who told about how she was 8 years old in the 70s and her friend of the family, 19-year-old, left her in the airport at 8 years old by herself, and she made it home safely. And that's a good focal comparison to what we were just talking about, because, you know, like, people are still good and kids are going through a lot, but like the world still has good in it. We just don't hear it. But my recommendation is actually interesting. I was doing my taxes and I stumbled across this talent.com tax calculator where you can see state by state how the cost of living and the overall effective tax rate change. And I was really surprised because you hear all these comments about tax havens in Nevada and Florida and Delaware and all this stuff. But the truth is, it actually was more expensive to live in Idaho, where I have a partner, than it is in Illinois for a relative salary. So it's fascinating just to move the sliders and see the stuff. And I don't know if it's accurate, but it's certainly fun over a cup of coffee.
I love it. Rob, what do you got?
I'm going to recommend a book. It is called Touching Two Worlds. It is written by my wife. It comes out in 2 months. And this is her second book. She went through, first one she self-published, and this one she went through publisher. But this book is, kind of relates to our last story, to be honest. It's a guide for finding hope in the landscape of loss. And my wife started writing it. She's a clinical psychologist, and she started writing it as her dad was dying of cancer over the course of 18 months. And then within 6 months of that, her brother took his own life. And so it was a couple years, I'll tell you. But the book started as her memoir of dealing with that as someone who is a mental health professional. And then it turned into almost, it's not just a memoir, right? It has like tips and exercises and thoughtful things that at the end of each chapter to kind of bring it home to, hey, it's a book for people dealing with grief. And so if you're dealing with grief, or if you have someone who, someone who is dealing with grief, that's what she wanted to do, because she couldn't find another book like it out there.
My recommendation does not deal with grief in a serious topic like that, but it does deal with how to handle aggression and frustration. And that is something that I had the opportunity to do this past weekend with Heather Wild-Renzi herself. And that is, we threw axes together. And it was really fun. And it was an excellent stress release. It was the complete opposite.
It's a few people that like to throw an axe at me.
It was very different. And we did see some teenagers there out and about doing something physical without a screen. And I'm putting the link to the one we went to at this super cool place called Area 15, which is very similar to Area 51 and very weird and creepy too. But they have these places all over, and I think it was super fun, and it was very therapeutic. Go take out some stress and throw some axes. Heather, what do you think?
They let you put a picture of your favorite person on the board, right?
They should.
Yeah, you could. Yeah. Well, no, it had to be a wet board. And there's actually a video that was taken of me actually getting a bullseye.
Boom!
The only one that I got. But
and it was the only video taken of her, and it was when she got a bullseye. Yeah. It was awesome.
Got Matthew.
Yeah, no, Andrew took it. For me, today I'm recommending the Relief Band. So reliefband.com has these things that you put on your wrist if you get motion sickness. It's amazing to wear. I've had one for like 20 years. They've got like newer versions now, but it's just like if you're ever get motion sickness or nausea, just wear one. They're amazing.
I used one on a cruise when I got super
Those are really
sick,
great. They're like $5.
which may or may not have anything to do with all the champagne the day
Spencer,
before.
put it into Slack.
Yeah,
Jonathan, did we hear your recommendation?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
But it wasn't as good as the rest of the panel, Stephanie.
All right. Well, you can do better next week. There's always next week.
Yeah, I could always improve, can't I, Stephanie? A lot.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for not yelling at me, for those of you who didn't. And everybody, I hope you have a great week. We will see you next Friday. Bye.
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 Okay.